The Newsfeed Late Night continues. Now we're back with you. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi says if all goes according to plan, the country's ports of entry will reopen. 20 of the country's ports of entry were closed in January with some exceptions. Now, until the 15th, this would have been in place. Now, if all goes according to plan, this will be opened on Monday. This, of course, awaits the approval of the Coronavirus Command Council and an announcement by the President. Well, to help us unpack this and the current state of Home Affairs, I'm joined now by the Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Minister, good evening, and thank you very much for your time tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night.
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to the viewers out there. Thank you very much for having me.
Minister, is it too early to say that we are ready to open our ports of entry?
Well, today I was presenting our report about our state of readiness. Right from the beginning, Thabo, I said the borders will open on the 15th, and we've been getting ready for quite a long time. But I also said some of the meetings, because they are ongoing. I heard you earlier on saying we're meeting, for instance, with Port Health. These meetings are ongoing. All we were saying today was that some of them will still be going on even tomorrow, even on Thursday, even on, so that you tweak your program according to what arises in some of those meetings. So it was not that there were no meetings before. As I heard you earlier when you were talking to a member of EFF, it's not like that. All we're saying is that the meetings are ongoing. In one meeting, you put certain things on the table. They will tell you, we'll answer you in the next meeting, etc., etc.
It looks clumsy on our end at implementation. That's why I'm saying I don't know where those meetings took place, because it's either we are suffering from the disease that we always suffer from of operating in silos, because, I mean, how do you then have so little personnel capacity at the borders when you know that you're going to be doing these massive testings, right? You might say, well, at immigration we were ready. Immigration was empty, but the queues were there at health. It means there is no coordination with your counterpart. Did you sit down and talk about these issues to say, well, you will need to beef up your capacity, so let's have a coordinated effort and work together towards a smooth running at our ports of entries?
We did sit, Thabo. Well, the issue of coordination, you are aware that it's not something that we are hiding. The fact that Parliament had to pass an act coming from the executive to establish the Border Management Authority was the realization that we don't have good coordination at the borders and we need an authority. And as you know, from the 1st of January, we appointed an acting commissioner. That means there's now going to be a commissioner who deals with borders, just like we have got a commissioner of police. You are now going to have a commissioner under the Border Management Authority, working with 2 deputy commissioners. Now, because we need the president to sign the presidential mandate for us to advertise the post, and we could not wait. We chose an acting commissioner, and he's the one who was presenting today. That is the first step towards coordination, Thabo. And as you heard today when he was presenting, he was talking about the various people he's coordinating and he's meeting. Now, coming to the issue of Port Health, Port Health falls under a chief directorate under the Department of Health. It is the people who go around testing people. You will agree with me, Thabo, that the Department of Health is overstretched all over the country. Where people are being tested, it is them. So we did sit with them. We did sit with them under net joints to plan, and they promised a certain number of staff members, which unfortunately they could not reach. So what we presented today was to show where the weaknesses are and how do we go forward in correcting them. So we made proposals, for instance, that we are still talking with Port Health to increase the number of people. Because if you saw the slide, which the member of EFF was talking about, it was showing that out of the entities at the border, immigration in Home Affairs, SARS, the revenue service, the police, South African Police Services,
Yeah.
and SADF, each was showing that the smallest number was with Port Health.
Yeah.
And so we were saying we are still waiting for them to increase the numbers. If they don't, we put two alternatives. That will go to South African Military Health Services and ask them to augment, but will also go to private sector and ask the private sector companies to come and help.
Yeah.
In December and January, we could not get private sector companies because most of them said they were contracted to the mines.
Okay.
Because the mining houses, when they were receiving miners from all over SADC, hired their own private sector companies to do the testing. And many private sector companies had those contracts. So we are hoping now that that work was done, many of them will be free to come and augment the Port Health.
But Minister, when are you going to have those talks? You're cutting it too close to the deadline. And for example, the whole ticketing system, the whole ticketing system, you have not tested it. It's only going to be in place on the 14th, which means you're going to test it on the go. Your words tonight, you're saying the ports will be opened on the 15th. But if the system is only going to be in place on the 14th, you're cutting it too close, right? You haven't spoken to private sector right now to say they will give you how many people. When are you going to have those conversations so that we know that when you open, those people are there?
Says who, Thabo? Who says we haven't spoken to?
So how many people is the private sector going to give you?
No, one private sector company is already giving 18 people, and it has already done so in January. And so I'm not sure exactly what your point is.
I'm saying my point is right. Let's look at that slide. For example, you're saying in one of the ports you've got 140 of your officials there, but you've only got 43 or 23 of Port of Health. Now, if you're saying they're only giving you 18, how does that help and improve the situation?
No, Thabo. That slide you are talking about, slide number 12. Is showing the situation which pertained in January, which led us to where we are today. Now, I heard the statement that slide number 1 to 10 was just a repetition of what we already know. Yes, we were recapping what happened in slide number 1 to 10, what happened and what is that which we are going to avoid. So when we put those numbers, we're showing what happened in January, and we're working towards avoiding that. And I don't know why you say only on the 14th. Some of the slides there were showing that, no, this and that will be available on the 9th, this and that on the 10th, this and that on the 12th. The fact remains that it's not on the 15th yet, on the day of opening of the borders.
I'm talking particularly the ticketing system. Jean Ravede, the commissioner, saying that will be in place on the 14th. I know he said the markings will be done earlier, I think the 9th. And the sanitizers will be also in place, giving us his word there around the 9th. But that particular system, which is the new thing that you're adding to this component to deal with the issue of congestion, is that ticketing. You're saying that will only be in place on the 14th.
Well, then what's wrong with that? It's as if the whole plan...
When is it going to be tested, Minister?
It's as if the whole plan is around the ticketing system. He was just mentioning a whole range of things that are being done. He didn't mention only ticketing. He mentioned a broad range of things, including issues of infrastructure, issues of markings, issues for fencing, issues of putting up rails. The ticketing system is just one of those things. Why are you talking as if the whole plan is around the ticketing system?
Okay, let's unpack the other stuff then. The other part of the challenge is the fact that you need to speak to your counterparts in the other countries who, according to the commissioner, do not process the people at their immigration and they leave them to come through to South Africa to be processed. When are those conversations going to happen?
No, Thabo, that has already happened. That has already happened. It does not have to be done by me. Officials have already met, if you listen very carefully. And he even said, the DG this week, on Monday, that's yesterday, has written letters to the counterparts because some of them, some of those mentioning, doesn't need any meeting. It's just to inform them. We were saying there are times at which we realized from our neighboring countries that when they've got lots of people, they just let them through. You find people arriving on the South African side, even without a passport being stamped. Now, for good neighborliness and out of humanitarian reasons, we let them through. This time we wrote letters and say, no, it's not going to happen. If you don't process a person who arrives on the South African side without a passport, we'll just send them back. That's what we're saying. That doesn't need any meeting. It just needs you to inform them because it is something they are not supposed to be doing in the first place.
So, I mean, should that give us confidence that there will be better coordination? You say, well, we just wrote a letter and they shouldn't be doing that anyway. And the fact that they know that they shouldn't be doing that anyway, they still did it, Minister, in December, and it created chaos. There was no fallback to that.
Then we'll turn them back. We'll tell the person to go back to where they come from. That's exactly what we put in the letter. If you come in with the necessary documents or without being processed, it's wrong for a person to get into another country without the issues of passport having been administered, having been finalized. So we'll just turn them back. It's as simple as that.
Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Stay with me, Minister. We're taking a break. We'll come back to you in a moment. You can be part of this conversation. Tag us on Twitter at Newsroom405. WhatsApp your questions and your comments on 072-110-5584. The Minister of Home Affairs unpacks a little bit more plans of that one port of entry, a one-stop shop at the port of entry, and how far are those plans? You stay with us. Welcome back to your news feed late night and our conversation on the readiness of Home Affairs to open our borders. To help us unpack that conversation, we have with us the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. And we are taking your comments and your questions for the Minister tonight as well. But Minister, let me come back then to you. Let's talk about this issue. A taxi driver, for example, says, at our borders, even with the restrictions in place, right? Because you had, for example, food trucks being allowed to move in and out. It was as easy as paying 1,500 rands and hitching a ride with the food trucks, or paying the taxi driver 300 rands. And those people are able to cross through our borders without a stamp on the passport or even a test for COVID-19. How are we going to deal with that?
Well, Thabo, you are talking about issues of corruption, which we have never hidden. We do have a problem of corruption. That's why we are stepping up the anti-corruption unit, and that's why we specifically putting a border management authority. Because if you have got somebody who is coordinating the law enforcement agencies, working on a full-time basis, as I said, a commissioner and 2 deputy commissioners, working in coordination with other law enforcement agencies, you are likely to decrease incidents of corruption. What we was talking about was corruption, somebody being bribed and being paid to let you go through. That's what we are dealing with in Home Affairs. We agree there is a lot of corruption, but we do arrest people, we do charge many of them, we suspend quite a number of them.
Now, part of the problem that leads to the corruption, and not making an excuse for corruption, and indeed law enforcement agencies should kick in place and do what they need to do. There are 2 issues that are being raised here. One is the affordability of the test, ranging from 200 to 850, that in itself being an issue of concern as to why there isn't a single amount that is charged so that people are certain about what they're going to pay at the border. The other issue is the issue of, since COVID, for example, many passports have expired and people have not had the opportunity to go to Home Affairs to have those stamps renewed. And so in desperation to say, well, we need to get home, but we also need to come back and work and for the livelihoods of our families, we have to make that choice of paying the 300 rands or the 1,500 rands so that we can move to and fro.
You are actually justifying corruption, Thabo. Your statement was that you don't want to justify
I'm raising the issues that people are raising as to why they behave that way.
Yes, but I'm saying corruption is corruption. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. If you are doing something that is illegal and fraudulent, it is corruption and it can't be accepted. for whatever good reasons, it is still corruption. In court, if they catch you, they are going to sentence you. They will rather say it's a mitigating factor, but they can't say it's not corruption. Now, you are talking about people's documents expiring. Thabo, when we started the lockdown, when the pandemic started in March last year, we clearly mentioned that those who have got permits who will expire intra the pandemic, inside the lockdown, we extended them up to the 31st of July and said they will be regarded as not having expired by the 31st of July. When the 31st of July approached and we realized that COVID is still not going away, it's still raging, we extended them to the 31st of October. On the 31st of October, when we realized that COVID is not relenting, we extended to the 31st of January, then the 31st of March. So we are still inside there. Nobody can come and claim that their documents have expired because the 31st of March has not yet arrived.
So what you're saying is that people with expired documents that could have expired in July would still be allowed to enter South Africa or to leave South Africa on the 15th of February.
We are talking about permits, Thabo. People who are in South Africa with particular permits. In the past, when you have got a permit, the permit is for a particular number of days. If you exit those days, when you arrive at the border, you are declared an undesirable, your passport is stamped, then you are banned to enter South Africa for a particular period, maybe 2 or 5 years. So we do that if you are using documents that have expired. But now we said we keep on extending them as we did. Now the most recent extension date is the 31st of March, which means anybody who comes with a document that expired from the 26th of March last year to the 31st of March now, it won't be stamped undesirable. Those where it has been stamped by mistake or by overzealous officials, I have actually reviewed and set that aside and put aside the undesirability. Even today, I was still signing documents where people were declared undesirable, and I reviewed it and set it aside.
Talk to me then about this whole issue that is being raised about your lack of political will in implementing the Border Management Act. What are the issues that you're having with that act and having it implemented?
Well, you better ask the people who say so. My understanding is that, in my interpretation, a lack of political will is a willful, deliberate decision to obstruct an act of parliament or a directive from parliament or a directive from the executive, and I've done none of those times. So that's my understanding of lack of political will. If there is a statute or a law that needs to be implemented and you are willfully and deliberately obstructing or refusing, then there is no will. I've never done those.
All right, let's take some questions then, Minister, from our viewers. And I think we have tried to tackle this one, but maybe you'll expand a little bit more. Please ask the Minister how Home Affairs, the foreign national... please ask the Minister of Home Affairs, I'll repeat again, about the foreign nationals who have their work permit, visa and asylum seekers expired. What is the way forward for them? How are they going to access their banks and other essential activities? That's Joe from the Eastern Cape. The next question is, what measures has Home Affairs put in place across the country to ensure that COVID-19 regulations are adhered to in branches? That's George. All right, Minister, let's tackle those two. I had already asked you about the expired permits, but they're taking it further to say, what about their access to banks and such facilities?
No, but if you say you have got a permit, or whether it's a asylum seeker permit or a visitor's visa or a work visa, and we say all of those, we deem them as valid until the 31st of October. And I am repeating, we extended to 31st of July, then 31st of October, then 31st of January, then 31st of March. If we say they are valid, then it means the banks must accept them. because they accept identification from Home Affairs. And if Home Affairs say this permit of this person is valid, then they've got to accept it. If they can't, if they've got doubts, then they'll conduct Home Affairs.
And the question then around the protocols that are in place for COVID-19, we've already spoken about the markings which will be put in place to ensure that there is social distancing, and you're going to put in place sanitizers to ensure that everybody is sanitized. What else are you putting in place? I believe you're putting a limit. You were complaining about the truckers the last time we asked you about the chaos at the border. You're saying, well, the truckers are part of the challenges at the borders, and you're putting a 700-meter queue limit. How is that going to be enforced?
Yes, Thabo, thank you very much. The slide which earlier on it was claimed that we just repeating, rehashing what was there was actually to show that what went wrong with the trucks in December and January for the chaos that we saw to prevail. What went wrong is that there's been an agreement with the truck drivers that they must stay in the halting areas or the truck stops where they process their SARS documents. You are aware that these trucks are carrying goods that are taxed, that needs permit to pass through, etc., etc. That needs certain agents to process them and give them permits to go through. Now, we said that work must be done inside the holding centers or the holding areas. But it so happened that in December, the truckers just abandoned that and parked on top of N1 and even occupied the oncoming lanes. Now, what we are saying is that having learned that lesson, this is what we have done. We are not going to allow trucks to queue for more than 700 meters, not even 1 kilometer. Not once there's a queue of trucks of more than 700 meters, then the rest we divert them to the holding center. Next to Musina, to Beitbridge border boats in Musina, there is a holding area, a truck holding area that can accommodate 800 trucks at any one time. And during that chaos in December, that place was empty altogether. All the trucks have left it. They were all on N1. Now, this time we say we are not going to allow that. We have now arranged with the authorities in Limpopo, the traffic authorities, that they must give full-time traffic officers whose job is just to man that queue. In the past, the traffic officers were ad hoc. They were coming in whenever there's a problem. This time there will be traffic officers, a complement of traffic officers who, when they wake up, they go there to manage that queue. They look at the 700 meters. If it's more than that, then they push them into the holding areas. But we have also met the freight companies to say, please cooperate. Know very well that this is not what we are going to allow your truckers to do. Cooperate with us and help us. And they've agreed that they are going to be of help to us.
Talk to me then about the issues highlighted there, the holding sites, ablution facilities, and running water. And how are you going to ensure that those are in place in time?
No, the holding areas which they abandoned, Thabo, and made you in the press to start crying foul that there is no water, there's no ablution facilities. The truck-ins have got ablution facilities. They've got, the holding areas, the truck holding areas, truck stops, they've got ablution facilities, they've got showers, they've got bathrooms, they've got agents there who can connect the trucks with some of the clearing agencies. They all exist there. So it was very funny then they were left. And guess what? They charge only 40 Rand. Yeah. 40 Rand per truck. You can imagine a trucking company that is making millions or billions just avoiding to pay 40 Rand and staying on the road. So we are not going to allow that because all those facilities are there for them. By the way, there are even petrol stations in those truck holding areas.
Now, Minister, let's talk about those facilities. Are they government facilities? Are they being maintained by government?
No, they are not. They are private facilities, just like a petrol station is a private facility, but there are petrol stations all over the way. They are not maintained by government. So the truck stops are not government facilities. They are facilities that have been established with cooperation from government, with agreement from government, in order to serve the trucking community.
All right, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, do stay with us. We're back in a moment to wrap up this conversation and taking some of your calls. By the way, you can be a part of the conversation on Twitter at Newszoom405, or you can WhatsApp your questions and comments to 072-110-5584. Stay with us. Newsfeed Late Night continues next. Welcome back. You're with the Newsfeed Late Night and our conversation tonight with the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, on the state of our Home Affairs Department, our borders, and the readiness to reopen as restrictions are being lifted. Now, you are seeing there some pictures coming out from Featherfield. That is the House impeachment managers who are presently discussing the matter of convicting the former U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, the House has just been shown a video there showing a timeline that led to the storming of the Capitol and the violence which has unfolded. Of course, that is happening right now. Those are the pictures that you're seeing. As soon as we get a moment, we will be taking some of that live for you. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi is still with us. Now, he says if all goes according to their plan, which they've put in place, in fact, he's reiterating today that the borders will open on the 15th of February. Minister, let's talk about the other issue that was raised by the commissioner or acting commissioner today, that of the maintenance of our ports. He raises an interesting issue of, for example, the airports. They've got the airports company, South Africa, that takes care of those facilities. But our land borders have got no such infrastructure. What is the plan?
No, you didn't understand him, Tao. He was saying in all the ports of entry, remember we've got 3 types of ports of entry. It's the airports, 11 international airports, it's the seaports, 8 seaports, and it's land ports of entry, 53. At the moment, 20 are active because the others have been closed. Now, he was giving analogies that when you go to the airports, the host there is AXA, and AXA has got a maintenance plan. You don't go there and find dirty toilets and find something being broken. AXA will fix them. When you go to the seaports, it is Transnet. There's a unit under Transnet that is doing that. But when you come to the ports of entry, the host who owns those facilities and must maintain them is the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. What the commissioner was saying was that, unfortunately, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is struggling to maintain that capability of being a host. For instance, he gave an example that they maintain the system there by giving contracts and was saying some of the contracts were found to have expired and were not renewed. Now, when a contract of somebody who's a service provider is not renewed, it means the service cannot be provided. So we have been talking to Public Works about this type of things. But in terms of the Border Management Authority, that work will now rest in the hands of the Border Management Authority. That means the Border Management Authority will become masters of its own destiny. They will no longer depend on another department. But for now that we are depending, we're still talking to them, we're still meeting with them, which we have been doing. But unfortunately, it hasn't been going very well, I must state. That's very unfortunate.
So how is that going to impact on those facilities being clean and being at a state, particularly around COVID-19, that is sanitary?
No. As we say, to make sure that they remain cleaned, they must make sure that they renew their contracts and they've got a service provider. That is in the short term, but in the medium and long term, we want in terms of the act, actually, it's not that we want to, it's in the act, that the Border Management Authority will take over those functions and do them so that we become masters of our own destiny in that regard. But for the time being, we still depend on Department of Public Works and Infrastructure as the host, in the same way that at the airport we depend on AXA.
Now, Minister, let's talk then the budgets, the money that's going to be spent around these issues, because I suppose when we get over the hill on the other side, we discover that millions and millions were being used and we did not get the value. So let's try and get some information firsthand from this side before some of these issues come around. How much money is going to be spent? I believe there'll be some fencing that is going to be put in place to ensure that people stick into the queues, the markings, the sanitization, the ticketing system itself. How much is that going to cost, and all the other infrastructure that is required?
No, unfortunately, Tabo, I didn't check that, because as I'm saying, these are issues of tenders. I really don't deal with them. They've just looked for service providers to do that, but they will only inform me if the amounts of money, if the money is so exorbitant that it needs my attention. Up to so far, we had budgeted only a sum of 30 million rand for sanitizing, for masks and all that in Home Affairs. We didn't really spend, budget a lot of money. At the last time I checked, it was rand that were spent. When it comes to the infrastructure of the borders, it's a different kettle of fish altogether, because we said it will be a one-stop border post where you completely overhaul the infrastructure. Now that one is going to be so big that the government doesn't have money for it. It's going to be a PPP, which is going to work in the form of a concessionaire. The concessionaires will bring all the money. In other words, it will be built like, I don't know, Tabo, whether you know how N1 from Kranskop in Mudimulele up to Polokwane was built in 1996. It cost 600 million. That money, no cent came from the state. It was put up by 5 concessionaires, 5 different companies. I just remember BHP Billiton and Marian Roberts, but there were 5. And the government said, look, put up all the money, build this, and then collect all the toll road, the toll fees for a period of 20 years while you are maintaining. That's why that place was always maintained. It was always clean. The lawn was always cut. Every time there's a pothole, they fill it up immediately, because they were collecting money at the tolls for a period of 20 years before giving back to the state. We are going to do exactly the same thing with the borders, so that we have got a first-class world infrastructure. And the private companies have agreed, because many of them are also going to be beneficiaries, because they no longer have the congestion or the inconvenience which they are experiencing at the present moment.
All right. Let me take a call from Teps in Pretoria. Teps, good evening. Teps, if you're there, good evening.
Good evening, Tabo.
Welcome. What is your question for the minister?
So I want to ask if my question is the Home Affairs going to issue study permits after 15th of this month?
Home Affairs going to issue what permits, Teps?
Study permits.
Study permits after the 15th. All right, Teps in Pretoria. Appreciate your call tonight. Minister, are you going to be issuing study permits after the 15th of February?
Yeah, study permits are issued all the time for people who want to come to South Africa and study. We can't deprive people of the opportunity to study. Once people have got admissions to universities, we give them study permits, of course.
But is that something that you're saying happens generally, or is there going to be a specific dispensation for them, considering that we have had, suppose, a break in normal processes around the COVID-19?
No, we never stop study permits. Those which were people got, as we said, we renew them. Usually, Tabo, when you are given a study permit, is given for the total period of study. If you say your studies at university is 6 years, you'll be given a study permit for 6 years. It doesn't have to be given every year. If you say it's 3 years, now that is the beginning of the year, the universities are opening. If the new students will be coming, will obviously be needing study permits. But those who were having them from last year were renewed, and they were not given for only 1 year. So it means we'll be giving study permits to students who are only admitted in universities this year under the new COVID-19 regulations and under the new normal, under which the universities are also operating.
Now, Minister, you've already spoken about the private sector or public-private partnership as far as the one-stop shop port of entry is concerned. How far are we in that process?
You are aware that the policy, to finalize the policy, we have issued a government gazette on the 31st of December for public comments, and the closing date is the 28th of February. But even before that, we are already engaging. I personally, after coming to Home Affairs, I met all my counterparts from the neighboring countries to discuss the one-stop border post, because there are 3 models to choose from, so that we could choose a model and agree how we are going to run it. Because one-stop border post means exactly that instead of being processed on one side of the border by one country, maybe for 3 to 6 hours, and then you cross over, you start the same process all over again. One-stop border post means the 2 countries come together under one roof. They process you once and for all. If they don't do that, another model is, for instance, to agree that if somebody is coming from Zimbabwe, when they arrive at Beit Bridge, the Zimbabweans, and they are coming to South Africa, the Zimbabweans don't touch them. They just cross, they get touched by the South Africans on the South African side. If you are crossing over into Zimbabwe, the South African side don't touch you. They just leave you to go through. You are touched by the Zimbabwean side. That's one of the models. So to arrive at all those models, we had to meet, and we have already done so. But the task teams have been meeting. I think for the past 24 months, they've been meeting at the technical level.
Right.
The only country I did not meet politically was Zimbabwe, because on the day of the meeting, there was a change of political guard, and the new minister said they need time. But the technical staff has always been meeting and planning for this border management authority. I mean, for this one-stop border post.
Minister, we appreciate the generosity of your time tonight. Thank you very much for joining us on the Newsfeed Late Night. Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, Minister of Home Affairs, outlining the readiness to open our borders come the 15th of February. The News